everyone. So if you've been watching our channel, you know that we picked up a wood-fired clay brick pizza oven, and I've been experimenting with baking bread in it. Some failures so far. And so I'm revisiting this whole bread idea. Bread is my nemesis. It's something that I've played with over the years and I've tried, but I've never quite gotten good enough. And we've always lived somewhere where there's been a bakery that, you know, for $1 or $2, you could get a really good artisanal loaf of bread. But I'm going to take another run at it. And taking another run at bread means, of course, naturally leavened bread or sourdough bread needs to be brought into the mix. And I really like the idea of baking bread with natural yeast, wild yeast. All yeast is natural, so let's call it wild yeast, or the yeast that comes on the flour. So in order to go down this road, you have to make a starter. And it's really simple. I mean, it happens all on its own. If you mix an equal part of water with an equal part of flour, the yeast that already lives on the flour is going to bloom, it's going to multiply. And then all of the other bacteria that's in that flour will also bloom and multiply. And a couple of things are going to happen. The lactobacillus that's in there is going to come to life, and the pH is going to lower to the point where only good bacteria and only good yeast can live, making it safe so it can sit on your counter forever and it won't go bad. And so here's how you start out. On day one, you take equal amounts of flour and water. 2 ingredients, that's it. Mix them together. Put them in a non-reactive container, either glass or ceramic. For the first couple of days, I mark the container just so I can see when the yeast starts working. And you won't see much activity by day 2. You really won't see any until probably day 3. Put a piece of plastic wrap over it and leave it overnight. Day 2, you come back. If some of the liquid separates and floats to the top in between feedings, that's okay. Everything will be fine. I like to give it a smell every time I feed it. What it looks like and what it smells like is really going to tell you the health of your starter. You'll get to know it really well. You add another cup of flour and another cup of water. Now mix it together again really well. You're looking for kind of a loose batter like pancake batter. Put it back into a glass container, mark it if you want to, cover it in plastic wrap, and leave it for day 3. Day 3, you might start to see some bubbling action. You should start to see something, but if it hasn't happened yet, don't worry about it. Every time I feed it, I give it a really good stir to make sure it's a homogeneous mixture. Take out half and get rid of it. Throw it out, it's no good. You can weigh it or measure it to figure out what half is, but for the most part, eyeballing it is fine. To the remaining half, mix in 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of water. Mix it up really well. Again, you're looking for kind of a pancake batter consistency. Put it back in your container, use a clean container if you want to, and cover it with some plastic wrap. Now from day 3 to day 7, you're going to do exactly the same thing. You're going to take out half, you're going to put back in 1 cup of water and 1 cup of flour. Give it a mix, cover it, and leave it on your counter. By about, day 3 to day 5, it should already be working. You should have a pretty good amount of yeast and lactobacillus in there working. And it is viable at that point to go ahead and bake bread. But you really want the flavors to develop. The whole reason for using wild yeast and this wild culture is the flavor. It's not just about leavening the dough and creating lift and having it rise. It really is about all of the other flavor components that come with it. By day 7, it should be working, it should be fine, you should be able to start baking bread. Now, if you leave this culture on your counter, you're going to have to stir it every day, you're going to have to take out half every day, and then feed it, again with more flour and more water. Give it a stir, cover it, and then the next day come back. I gotta tell you, that's a bit of a pain in the ass. Even for someone who cooks as often as I do, for someone who spends their life in a test kitchen baking and making stuff, and an everyday feeding, I'm not really all that interested. So this can live in the fridge. And if you're someone who only bakes once a week, or once every other week, having it live in the fridge really is the best option. So you feed it, stick it in the fridge. The night before you want to bake something, you take it out, get rid of half, feed it, and then the next morning when you're going to bake, it will have bubbled up again. It'll be good and viable. Take out what you need for baking your bread, feed it again, put it back in the fridge, and forget about it. Really, you don't have to take much time or care with this. It's going to happen on its own. It's going to take care of itself. I know a lot of people get freaked out and they want to weigh it and they want to be really exact. I've spoken to a lot of professional bakers who are just like, yeah, you know, put some in, take some out, put some in, take some out. It's not rocket science. Humans have been doing this for thousands of years. But here are some really good tips for you in order to get started and keep it viable. When you first start out, I just used unbleached bread flour in this batch. A lot of people like to start with rye flour, unbleached rye flour. It has a slightly different group of flora and fauna, and I'll list the ones that are probably in there. But if you only have bread flour in your pantry, go ahead and use that. It'll be fine. But really, you should be using unbleached bread flour or unbleached all-purpose flour. Make sure the flour is unbleached because that whole bleaching process strips away a lot of nutrients, but it also strips away a lot of the natural bacteria and yeast that are there. It kills them, and it's going to take a lot longer to get going, and it's not going to taste as good, and it won't be as viable, and you'll kind of look at it and you go, oh, this is no good. I'm not going to do this anymore. So unbleached flour, rye flour is a great starting point, and you know, every once in a while just feed it again with rye flour. You feed it with bread flour in between, and I've started with white flour, but I've fed it a couple times with rye flour, and it smells really good, really good. The next thing is water. Tap water for most people is going to be fine, but some places over-chlorinate or over-chloramine, over-bleach their water to make it safe, and all of those chemicals in the water will slow down the development of the bacteria that you want. If you live in one of those places, use bottled water. It's probably the best choice. Distilled water, bottled water, mineral water. Just don't use your tap water if you think it's over-chlorinated. So that's it. Sourdough starter or levain. Some people will call this a barm. Whatever you want to call it. Come on back. We're going to bake some bread with it. We're going to make a lot of other things with it because you're going to be feeding this and discarding, and you don't always want to discard it. So, you know, maybe you might want to make some waffles or muffins or cakes. Pretty versatile. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.